Right now, beneath the streets of Naples, something terrifying is happening. In the past 7 days alone, 66 earthquakes have shaken the ground where nearly 1 million people live, work, and sleep. But here's what should keep you awake at night. It's not just the earthquakes. Deep beneath the neighborhood, called Pisciarelli, the fumarole vents, massive cracks in the earth that release superheated gas and steam, are physically splitting open wider. Scientists watching thermal cameras have recorded something they've never seen before. These vents are expanding along ancient fault lines, and the temperatures inside are climbing past 115 degrees Celsius. Steam is roaring out with such force that you can hear it from hundreds of meters away. The mud pools surrounding these vents are doubling in size, bubbling violently as pressurized gases force their way up from 3.5 kilometers below the surface. And every single day, over 600 tons of carbon dioxide, the same amount released by an actively erupting volcano, is pouring out of just one vent. This isn't a disaster movie. This is Campi Flegrei, Europe's most dangerous supervolcano, and it's waking up. What you're about to see in this video will change how you understand volcanic risk forever. Because while the world watches faraway eruptions in Iceland or Hawaii, the real threat is hiding in plain sight beneath one of Italy's most densely populated cities. 500,000 people live directly inside the caldera, the collapsed crater left behind by a massive eruption 40,000 years ago. Most of them have no idea that the ground beneath their homes has risen by 1.4 meters since 2005. That's taller than most people. The harbor in Pisciarelli, once a thriving port, now sits so high that boats scrape the bottom at low tide. Fishermen can't dock. Ferries have been rerouted. And yet, life goes on. But here's the part that should terrify you. The earthquakes aren't random. They're following a pattern. In the last 30 days, scientists recorded over 2,200 seismic events. That's more than 70 earthquakes every single day. Some are so small, you'd never feel them, but others, like the magnitude 4.6 earthquake that struck on June 30th, 2025, are strong enough to crack buildings and send people running into the streets. That quake was the strongest ever recorded in this region's modern history. So why are the vents cracking open? The answer lies deep underground. Using advanced seismic imaging, researchers have discovered a network of 64 major faults crisscrossing beneath Pisciarelli, some stretching nearly 3 kilometers long. These aren't stable, ancient cracks. They're active, and they're moving. Even more alarming, scientists have detected never-before-seen seismic signals called very long-period waves. These signals last between 60 and 90 seconds, far longer than normal earthquakes, and they originate from a depth of 3.6 kilometers. What's causing them? A pressurized channel of magma, gas, and superheated water forcing its way upward through fractured rock. The fumarole vents at the surface are simply the visible endpoints of this underground highway. And as pressure builds, those endpoints are cracking wider. When it created an entirely new mountain called Monte Nuovo in just 48 hours? Or will it continue this slow, grinding unrest, cracking buildings, displacing tens of thousands of people, and turning entire neighborhoods into hazard zones? Let me show you exactly what's happening right now. And I want you to ask yourself this question as we go through the data. If you lived in Pisciarelli and you felt 6 earthquakes in one day, would you stay or would you leave? Drop your answer in the comments, because what I'm about to show you might change your mind. Over the past 7 days, seismographs at the ANV monitoring stations have recorded 66 distinct earthquakes. The strongest hit magnitude 2.2 on December 29th. That might sound small, But when you're living directly above the epicenter, a magnitude 2 quake is enough to rattle windows, knock pictures off walls, and wake you up at 3 in the morning. On January 4th alone, 9 separate earthquakes struck between magnitudes 0.1 and 1.0. And just yesterday, January 5th, 6 more tremors shook the ground beneath Pisciarelli. Now multiply that across an entire month. 2,225 earthquakes in 30 days. That's an average of 74 earthquakes every 24 hours. But the earthquakes are only part of the story. What's happening at the surface is even more disturbing. At a place called Pisciarelli, located on the outskirts of Pisciarelli, there's a fumarole field where superheated gases escape from deep underground. These aren't small steam vents. The main fumarole, called Subsurface, is a roaring column of gas and steam that releases over 600 tons of carbon dioxide every single day. To put that in perspective, that's the same output as a medium-sized volcano that's actively erupting right now. Scientists measuring the CO2 flux found that it has tripled since 2012. Tripled. That means the underground pressure is building at an accelerating rate. And here's where it gets truly alarming. Thermal cameras positioned around Pisciarelli show that the fumarole vents are not just releasing more gas, they're physically widening. Since 2018, researchers using drone photogrammetry have documented substantial expansion of these vents. The cracks are following the paths of underground faults, and as the pressure increases, those faults are fracturing further. The average temperature inside the main vents now hovers around 115 degrees Celsius, hot enough to boil water instantly. But some vents, like Boca Grande Solfatara crater, have spiked to temperatures near 160 degrees Celsius. At those temperatures, sulfur deposits around the vent openings begin to melt, turning from bright yellow to a glowing orange-red. Now here's a question for you, and I really want you to think about this. What do you think is harder to predict, an earthquake or a volcanic eruption? Comment below, because the answer might surprise you. And it's directly connected to what's happening at Campi Flegrei right now. Scientists have now mapped what's happening beneath the surface, and what they found should concern everyone living in Naples. Using advanced seismic imaging, researchers identified 64 major fault lines crisscrossing underneath Pisciarelli. Some of these faults stretch nearly 3 kilometers in length. But here's what makes this discovery so critical. The fumarole vents at Pisciarelli aren't randomly placed. They sit exactly where these faults intersect. Now, in 2018, scientists detected something they had never seen before at Campi Flegrei. They recorded very long-period seismic signals, waves that lasted between 60 and 90 seconds. Normal earthquakes produce waves that last just a few seconds. These prolonged signals come from a depth of 3.6 kilometers, and they reveal something terrifying. There's a channel down there, a pathway where pressurized fluids, gases, and possibly magma are rising from a deep reservoir toward the surface. Every time one of these long-period signals occurs, it means something is moving underground. The pressure is building, the faults are fracturing, and the vents are cracking open wider to release that pressure. Here's my question for you. If scientists told you that the ground beneath your city was rising 2 centimeters every single month, would you believe them? And more importantly, would you do anything about it? Because that's exactly what's happening right now in Pisciarelli. Since 2005, the ground has risen 1.4 meters. That's not a typo. The entire coastal area has bulged upward by more than 4 feet. The harbor, once bustling with fishing boats and ferries, now sits so high that vessels scrape the seabed at low tide. Bollards that were once at water level now stand a meter above the waves. And here's the terrifying part. Scientists have found a direct mathematical link between ground uplift and earthquake frequency. The higher the ground rises, the more earthquakes occur. So what does all of this mean for the 900,000 people living in the Naples metropolitan area? Let me be clear. Approximately 500,000 people live directly inside the caldera danger zone. On June 30th, 2025, a magnitude 4.6 earthquake struck Pisciarelli. It was the strongest earthquake ever recorded in this region's modern history. Buildings cracked. A magnitude 5 earthquake in a densely populated urban area would cause catastrophic damage. Masonry buildings would collapse. Infrastructure would fail, and with 500,000 people trying to evacuate simultaneously, the chaos would be unimaginable. But there's another risk that keeps scientists awake at night, and it's one that most people don't even know exists. Hydrothermal explosions. With the code 2 levels escalating, the vents cracking wider, and the underground pressure building, there's a very real possibility that a sudden seismic event could trigger a violent steam explosion. It wouldn't be magma erupting. It would be superheated water and gas detonating with massive force, hurling rocks, mud, and toxic gases across hundreds of meters. In 1538, when Monte Nuovo was born during Campi Flegrei's last eruption, it happened in just 48 hours. An entire mountain, 123 meters tall, appeared almost overnight. 24 people died. Here's what I need you to understand. The situation at Campi Flegrei isn't static. It's dynamic and accelerating. The 66 earthquakes this week aren't just numbers on a chart. The cracking fumarole vents aren't just interesting geological features. They're urgent warnings that the system is destabilizing. And right now, authorities have already taken action. Public access to the Pisciarelli fumarole area has been completely prohibited. The Solfatara crater, once a popular tourist destination, has been closed since 2019 due to safety concerns. In 1983, during the last major crisis, over 30,000 people were evacuated from downtown Pozzuoli. Could it happen again? Absolutely. So here's my final question for you, and I want you to really think about this before you answer in the comments. If you were in charge of Naples and Pisciarelli right now, what would you do? Would you order evacuations and risk causing mass panic? Or would you wait for more definitive signs and risk being too late? There's no easy answer, and that's exactly the dilemma facing Italian authorities at this very moment. I'll be monitoring this situation closely and updating you the moment anything significant changes. If you want to stay informed about Campi Flegrei, hit that subscribe button right now. This story is far from over, and you need to know what happens next.